I don't know exactly how to start. I thought I was going to preach on the fullness of God. Sitting there, God changed my mind. I think before we can really experience the fullness of God, we have to know God. I mean, really know God. And this may come across as sounding a little odd, but I'm going to take you where the Lord took me. I heard a guy say something today that I just couldn't get off my mind, and as I was sitting there, God began to use it to give me this. And I want to tell you something about God. He had dirty feet. Mm-hmm. And I heard a guy say that, and I began to think about that. And before we get to that part, I want you to really try to picture God. And I know we can't. Throughout the Bible, there's some things that we're told about God, and we can get kind of a little idea of who God is. And I want to read you a couple things. You don't have to flip to these. But I want to read you a couple things just to try to, as I read these, try to get an understanding of the immenseness. I don't even know what words to use of God. There just are no good words when you're trying to describe and picture this God that we serve. It's hard to come up with words that will fit. But do your best to try to understand and get as much of a picture and an idea of this God that we serve as you can. As I said, I'm going to read some scriptures in different places, and you don't have to be flipping around. But as I read these, just really think about this. In Exodus, chapter 24, we have an account of when God came down on the mount to meet with Moses. And it says there in Exodus 24, verse 17, it says, "And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel." Listen, the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of the mount. That's just one verse out of there. And if you go back and you read in Exodus how God was described and how the mountain shook and the smoke on the mountain, that was because of the presence of this God that we serve. This is the God who we serve, with whom we have to do, who is like this. In Exodus 40 and 34, it said, "A cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." And if you go and you read about that, and you go and read it, it was so filled with the presence of God that they couldn't get in there. They couldn't enter because of the presence of the glory of God. They couldn't minister. They couldn't do anything. And again, I know I'm repetitive, but I want you to really try to understand and get a hold of who this God is. I think the problem is we have put God in a box, and we've made him something. But I don't think we've allowed him in our hearts, in our minds, and in our lives to be who he is. I know I said this before, it might have been last week. We've tried to bring God down to our level and tried to understand him. What we need to accept and what we need to understand is you can't understand God. He's so high above anything that we're able to comprehend. We can't understand him. What we have to do is accept him for who he is. Don't try to put our characteristics on him, our ideas on him, our thoughts on him. We can't do that. First Kings, it's talking about how when the glory of God came into the house of the Lord. First Kings 8:11, it said, "So that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord." And we go into Psalms 19:1, and Psalms is filled with these kind of things. "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." And we take things for granted, but if you just go out here and look, and imagine, if you can, a God who could speak all this into existence. And I know we say these things, but I don't think we grasp these things.
Amen.
And I know I've said this here before. When we used to do the campground ministry, we would sit on the benches down there, and there's all these little tiny flowers that grew between the benches. Teeny, tiny little things. And I would pick them and look at them real closely. And you could see such detail in those tiny little things. And when God spoke, this came into existence. But think about this also. That volcano that went off not too long ago in Hawaii, God spoke. And that came into existence. And God spoke, and that sun that huge ball of fire that is out there in the sky, and because it is where it is, and it is exactly the temperature, and it does exactly what it does, we have life here on the earth. Think about a God who encompasses all those kind of things and so much more than I can ever describe to you, more than I can ever bring out. And listen to this, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, beginning of verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphims, each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly. And one cried unto another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. I'm going to read one more place. In the book of Revelation, in chapter 4, this is John writing, beginning at verse 1. He said, After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, the throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had a face of a man. And the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come. And when those beasts give glory and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne, and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. And just think about this, and it's hard to picture these things, but this is a God who is so amazing. Like I said, I don't know what words to use, that he has to have these beasts and these elders and these cherubim and seraphims and angels constantly crying, Holy, 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 because he is so holy, because he is so righteous, because he is all these things. And when John looked on him, what he saw was the likeness of these stones and precious things. And you can go throughout the Bible and you can find other places and other kinds of descriptions and stuff. But if you start to try to put this stuff together in our feeble little minds and imagine who this God is that we serve and how very far above us he is and how high and majestic and mighty and holy and righteous and everything that encompasses this God that we serve. And then think about this. He left that to be born in a barn full of animal manure and flies and bugs and dirt and filth. Can you imagine that? And again, I know it's hard to get a picture of who this God really is, but as close as you can get, as much as you can get, imagine that. I mean, he's on his throne, and he is such a God that it has to be constant, that it is being cried, Holy, holy, holy. And he leaves that. And he comes, and he's born in this barn full of filth and rats and dirt and flies and all this kind of stuff wrapped up in dirty rags. Leaving that to come to this, to be in that place. And as he grew up in a human body, in a human form, in this place, as I said, he had dirty feet. Just imagine him as a child playing. And if you can get a picture in your mind of what it was like over there, it's all dirt and dust and sand and filth. you all know in the Bible, when they would go somewhere, they had to have their feet washed before they would go in and sit down for a meal. It was a dirty place. It was a dusty place. God left all that to do this, to walk around in the filth, in the dirt, in all the stuff that was there, and grow up in that kind of environment. And I don't know, the Bible don't tell us as he was growing up. We don't have a lot of account, except for when he went to the temple when he was 12, until later on in his life. But I have to imagine he experienced all the same kind of things that we did growing up, because he came to live as a human being. He came to live as a man. And you know, a lot of our life isn't pretty. A lot of it is dirty and filthy, and a lot of it is hard to put up with and hard to handle. But you think about things that have happened in your life, and that you would have done almost anything to get out of, that you would have done almost anything to lay aside and not have to go through. And he went through those things, left that to go through these things. And he did all that for one reason: because he loved us. And I know we know these things, and we say these things, and we talk about these things. We need to try to get a grasp on these things and really understand these things. Yeah, you know, I don't know if it was Butch that said it this morning or something, somebody said something about we act like he owes us something. Mm-hmm. He owed us absolutely nothing.
That's right. That's right.
The only thing we ever deserved was hell. But he left that, which I wish I could describe it, to come and live like he lived, because he loves us. Not because we deserve it, not because he owes us anything, not because we're something great or magnificent or anything like that, but because he loves us. He left all that and came into a world, and I don't know how else to describe it, but the way that God put it on my mind, a world of filth.
That's right.
This is a dirty, dirty place. And I'm not just talking about the dust and the mud. This is a dirty place. And he left all that to come here and to be ridiculed and to be mocked and to be ignored and to be spat upon and to be, when he was, after he started his ministry, and the accounts that we have of some of the things, how he was rejected, he went about doing good, he went about healing, he went about offering hope and offering love, and he was rejected and turned away. He didn't have to go through all that. And what he did was he left all that to do that. How many of us, if we could have got out of rejection in our lives, hurt in our lives, hard feelings in our lives, people not liking us and all the things like that, we would have done anything to get out of it. He left everything to get in it because he loves us. And the ultimate, we all know the account of when he was finally taken, and the so-called trial that he went through, and what he put up with, and discouraging, and smacked, and the beard ripped out of his face, and spit on, and all that kind of stuff that he went through. And imagine again, and I know it's hard, he left that to do that. He chose to do it. It was not forced upon him. Nobody could have made him do it. You all know what he said. Nobody could take his life. He freely gave his life. He not only freely gave his life there, but from the time he was born in that barn, he gave his whole life for one purpose and one purpose only. And it was because he loved us. It was because he cared so very much about us that he left all that and came and went through all that. And when we really start to think about some of these things and really try to get a hold of it and really try to understand it, if you can begin, and I know we come so far from really being able to understand, but if you can begin to get a hold of it, it will make such a difference in your heart. It will make such a difference in your relationship with Christ.
It will make such a difference in how you approach Him and how you honor Him and how you worship Him and how you serve Him and how you praise Him. If we can really just... see, we've got it to this thing like this was something that He had to do. He had to come and do all this, and because He had to come and do all this, now we've accepted Him. And because we have so many promises in the Bible of things that He will do for us, we have gotten to that point where we act like He owes us. We do that. And I don't know how we ever got there, but that's where we are. We owe Him.
That's right. That's right.
Far more than we'll be able to repay. Far more than we'll be able to give. The pitilance of praise we give Him, the pitilance of worship we give Him, the few things we do to try to win others to Him are nothing compared to what He has done, compared to what He has given. And it's just something wrong. There's just something wrong with how we've come to think about God. And as I started out saying this, and for whatever reason that phrase stuck in my mind, and it hits me. God had dirty feet because He loved us. If He would do all that He did for us, leaving all that and coming and going through all that, and I know we say these kind of things a lot, and these come into my messages a lot. Don't you think that if He would do all that there is nothing that He would withhold from you? I think we live like we live and go through what we go through and put up with what we put up with and do without what we do without, and so many other things because we have yet to understand God. We don't appreciate God. Everybody wants to be appreciated. Don't you want to be appreciated? When you have a job and you work and you know you're doing a good job, don't you want to be appreciated? When you do something nice for somebody and you've gone out of your way to do it or whatever, you want to be appreciated. Don't you think God wants to be appreciated? But again, we've come to that place where we expect. And it is that mindset. It is, whether we consciously think it or form the thought or even say it, we do live like, God, you owe me. That's how we live. And I've heard preachers who will say that if you say certain words a certain way, God has to do this. We don't control God. We don't tell God what He has to do. And if we would begin to understand better and really realize everything that He gave up and everything that He took on and everything that He went through in order that we could live, I think it would make a big difference in how we even approach God. I think, and I'm not trying to insult anybody or put anybody down, I think a lot of what we do is still habit. I really believe that it is. And again, don't get me wrong, and I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not trying to say anything about anybody, but this is just what God's put on my heart. Almost all of us, not all of us, but almost all of us, when we come and we bow before God and we want to pray, we have a pattern. We're not giving God our heart. This is in our mind. And I probably said this here before when I was growing up. When certain people would be asked to stand and pray, I could say it right along with them.
Amen. Amen.
It's become just something that we do. It's become routine. It's become ritual. It's become habit. And again, I'm not trying to put anybody down or say anything, but if we would just stop. Just stop before you ever open your mouth and meditate on who God is, whose presence you're coming into. You know, I've often said, just imagine you get to now come into the throne room of God. Because of what Christ did, and that veil in the temple was rent, and we had access, and we can come before the throne of grace. You just imagine, take these few things I read, and you go read some more. Just imagine if you were to actually enter into into that place. In the physical. We can do it in the spiritual, but imagine if you walked into that place that John described, that Isaiah described, that the other ones that I read described, and that you wouldn't just be going, "Our most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, as we so humbly come before you, blah, 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 blah." We wouldn't be doing that. We'd be filled